Hi everyone. Today we will be exploring negotiation planning, a critical competency in business, management, and almost every professional domain. Negotiation is not just an art, it is a systematic process that requires a lot of preparation, strategic thinking, and tactical execution. Whether you are negotiating a business contract or international trade agreements, the principle we discuss today will provide you with a structured framework for achieving optimal outcomes. Let's begin by establishing what negotiation planning actually involves. At its core, negotiation planning involves developing a comprehensive plan and overall strategy. So, what exactly is a plan? A plan is a method or a scheme for making or doing something to achieve a desired end. It's not simply a wish list, it is a deliberate roadmap that guides your actions toward specific, measurable objectives. Effective negotiation planning encompasses several critical components. Specific strategies that align with your organizational goals, research to understand the context, stakeholders, and market conditions, actions that you will take during the negotiation, tactics that support overall strategy. And now, before we dive into the planning process itself, let's examine why negotiations fail. Understanding failure mode is just as important as understanding success factors. Research has identified six primary reasons for failed negotiation. First, neglecting the other party's problem. When we fail to understand or acknowledge the challenges, constraints, and interests of the counterparts, we lose the opportunity to create mutually beneficial solutions. Negotiation is not a zero-sum game, it's about finding value for both parties. Second, focusing too much on price. While price is certainly important, overemphasizing it can build us to other variable valuable terms such as payment schedule, delivery timelines, quality specifications, warranties, and relationship building opportunities. Third, focusing on positions instead of interests. This is a classic mistake. A position is what someone says they want, and interest is why they want it. For example, a supplier's position may be we need a 10% price increase, but their underlying interest might be we need to cover raising raw material costs while maintaining profitability. Understanding interests open the door to creative solutions. Fourth, focusing too much on common ground. While identifying areas of agreement is important, successful negotiation also requires addressing areas of disagreement constructively. Avoiding difficult conversations does not make problems disappear. Fifth, neglecting BATNAs. BATNA stand for Best Alternative to Negotiate Agreement. It represents your walkaway option, what you will do if negotiations fail. Without a clear BATNA, you lack leverage and you may accept unfavorable terms out of desperation. Over adjusting perceptions during actual negotiation. This refers to being influenced too easily by new information or pressure tactics during the negotiation itself, causing you to cancel your well-researched positions without sufficient justifications. Keep this failure mode in mind as we progress through the planning steps. Each step is designed to help you avoid these consequences. The first step in negotiation planning is to develop specific objectives. An objective is defined as an aspiration or a vision to work toward in the future. Your objectives are the outcomes you hope to achieve through the negotiation process. Typical objectives include acceptable unit price, contract quantities, required delivery times, improved supplier quality. However, here is a critical insight. Not all objectives are equally important. This is where many negotiators struggle. They create long list of desired outcomes without differentiating between what is essential and what is merely desirable. This is why we must prioritize our objectives. A useful framework for prioritization divides objectives into two categories. Must have, which represents needs. These are non-negotiable requirements. They represent the minimum acceptable outcome. If these aren't achieved, the negotiation should be considered unsuccessful. And you should be prepared to walk away. For example, in supply contract negotiation, a must-have might be meeting specific quality certifications or delivery timelines that are critical to your production schedule. The second one would like to have your wants. These are desirable outcomes that would enhance the agreement but aren't essentially important. They provide room for flexibility and trade-offs. For example, you might want extended payment terms, but this might not be negotiable if you can secure your must-have. Why this prioritization so important? Because it serves as the basis for your concession strategy. During negotiation, you will almost certainly need to make concessions, giving up something to gain something else. Having a clear list of objectives allow you to make strategic concessions on your wants while protecting your needs. This prevents you from making impulsive concessions that could undermine your fundamental interest. The second step involves a comprehensive analysis of each party's strengths and weaknesses. This is where negotiation preparation becomes truly strategic. You need to understand not only your own position, but also that of your counterpart. How do you develop this understanding? Through research and experience. Specifically, you should investigate the following. First, personality. Is your counterpart analytical and data-driven or relationship-oriented? Are they risk-averse or aggressive? Understanding personality helps you adapt your communication style and approach. Second, negotiation style. Do they tend to be competitive or collaborative, formal or informal? Understanding their style help you anticipate their tactics and responses. Third, history of the other party. What is their track record? Have they been reliable partners in the past? Do they have a reputation for aggressive tactics or principled negotiation? Once you have gathered this information, you need to assess the relative strengths and weaknesses. What business professionals call due diligence. This involves objectively evaluating who has more leverage, who needs the deal more urgently, what are the constraints each party face, and what alternative does each party have. Finally, remember this critical principle. Each negotiation experience is unique. Even if you have negotiated with the same party before, circumstances change, market conditions shift, organizational priorities evolve, and different individuals may be involved. Never rely solely on past experience. Always conduct fresh analysis for each negotiation. Let's go deeper into the information gathering process. When analyzing the other party, you should ask yourself a list of critical questions regarding previous experience with the other party. What happened between the parties? Review the history of your relationship. Were previous negotiations collaborative? Understanding the relational history helps you anticipate potential sensitivities. Also, was the negotiator satisfied with the previous outcome? If your counterpart felt that they got a poor deal last time, they may approach this negotiation more aggressively, seeking to even the score. Also, are we negotiating with the same people or with different negotiators? Employees change, and this change can significantly alter negotiation dynamics. New negotiators may not be bounded by previous informal agreements or relationships. Besides, what were the important issues to the suppliers or to the buyers? Understanding what each party valued in the past helps predicting what they will value in the future. Also, what were the areas of disagreement? Identifying historical pain points allow you to prepare better responses and potentially find new solutions to persistent problems. Also, we need to ask ourselves, is there anything about previous conduct or protocols that should be changed? Perhaps the negotiation process itself was not successful. Should you change the venue, timing, or format to approve outcomes? Also, we need to ask ourselves, what is the relative power between parties? Power is rarely static. It changes over time. Market conditions, competitive pressures, and organizational changes all affect the balance of power. Also, who has the most to lose or the most to gain? The party with more at stake typically has less leverage. Understanding these stakes help you adjust your strategy. These questions form a comprehensive framework for analyzing the negotiation context and preparing your approach. Now, where do you actually find this information? There are several excellent sources of information available. For example, other buyers or organizations with experience with the supplier. Networking with peers in your industry can provide you valuable insights. They can share their experiences, warn you about potential issues, and offer practical advice. Also, information can be found from published sources. This includes trade journals and business publications that cover your industry, It can be internet websites like company websites, industry forum, social media, also trade associations and government data. Trade associations often publish industry benchmarks, best practices, and suppliers directories. Also, government agencies provide regulatory information, import-export data, and economic indicators. Besides that, annual reports for publicly traded companies, annual reports uh, are full of information revealing financial health, strategic priorities, risk factors, and management philosophy. Also, financial evaluation and database. These serves like a Bloomberg or industry-specific databases provide like detailed financial analysis, credit rating, and risk assessments. Finally, direct inquiry with the supplier. Don't overlook the obvious. Sometimes the best way to get information is simply to ask. A preliminary conversation can reveal much about the supplier's capabilities, their constraints, and interest. The key is to use multiple sources to triangulate your information and develop a comprehensive understanding of your counterpart position. As we continue analyzing the parties involved, we must recognize our partner's need, our suppliers' need, and so on. This is absolutely critical for several reasons. First, you must consider longer term success, not just winning this particular negotiation. If you extract maximum concessions today, but leave your partner feeling abused, you may damage a relationship that could have generated values for years to come. Second, issues critical to the supplier may not be issues critical to the buyer, and vice versa. This creates opportunities for what negotiation scholar called value creation or expanding the pie. When you understand what your partner or supplier truly value, you can have or you can often give them something that costs you little but is worth a lot to them, and vice versa. Third, give and take must be considered. Each party should not expect to prevail on all issues. Understanding this help you develop realistic expectations and balanced approach. Not all concessions are equal. Therefore, some cost you little, others are fundamental to your interest. Strategic negotiators think carefully about the sequence and the magnitude of their concessions. Finally, we need to identify facts and issues. What is the difference between them? A fact is a reality or truth that parties can state and successfully verify. Facts are objectives and verifiable. For example, the current market price for steel is 850 per ton. This is a fact that can be verified through market data. An issue consists of items or topics to be resolved. Issues are matters of negotiation where parties may have different preferences or positions. For example, what price should we pay for steel? This is an issue. A helpful analytical tool is a triangle talk. It is a framework that helps negotiate facts, issues, and positions in a systematic way. Step 3 requires you to establish a position on each issue. This is where negotiation planning becomes highly tactical and numerical. The key principle here is the need for agility and flexibility. You cannot enter a negotiation with a single rigid position. Instead, you should develop a range of positions for each issue. Minimum acceptable position, BATNA. This is your walk-away point, the worst outcome you are willing to accept. Below this threshold, you are better off pursuing your best alternative to negotiate agreement. This position protects you from accepting unfavorable deals out of pressure or depression. Maximum ideal position. This is your aspirational outcome, the best result you could realistically hope for. It is important that this be ambitious but credible. Unrealistic opening positions can damage your credibility and sour the negotiation atmosphere. Most likely outcome. This is your realistic assessment of where the negotiation will probably settle. Based on your research and analytics, it is typically fall somewhere between your minimum and maximum position. Here is where negotiation become interesting. When the range of position of both parties overlap, they create what is it called the bargaining zone or settlement zone. This zone represents outcomes that are acceptable to both parties. It is the heart of the negotiation process. If there is no overlap between your minimum acceptable position and the other party's minimum acceptable position, there is no zone of agreement, and negotiation will fail unless one party significantly adjusts their position or discover a new creative solution. Understanding this concept is critical because it helps you focus on negotiation effort and expanding the zone of agreement rather than fighting over fixed. Okay, let me illustrate this concept with an example. This slide shows a typical buyer-seller negotiation on price. In this example, the buyer aspiration point, which is the ideal position, is 11 per unit, $11 per unit. The buyer's BATNA is 11.15 or $0.15 per unit. The seller's aspiration point or the ideal position is 11.5 per unit. And the seller's BATNA, which is the minimum acceptable price, is $11.45 per unit. Now, notice something important here. There is no zone of agreement. The buyer won't pay more than $11.15, but the seller won't accept less than $11.45. There is a 0.3 gap between the parties' BATNAs. In this situation, negotiation is an impasse unless one party adjusts their BATNA based on new information. Creative solutions are found, perhaps volume discounts, longer contract terms, or value-added services that justify a higher price to the buyer or provide additional revenue to the seller. One party determines their alternative isn't as attractive as initially thought. Factors in modifying position during negotiation includes desirability of the contract. As strategic importance of the deal become clearer, parties may adjust their position. If the buyer realizes this supplier provides unique capabilities, they might be willing to pay more. If the seller learns this buyer offers offers access to new market segments, they might accept less. Also, revelation of some information that challenge the accuracy and credibility of the original position. Sometimes new data emerges that proves one party's assumptions were wrong. For example, if market research reveals that competitive pricing is actually higher than initially thought, the buyer position may shift. Also, major concession that promotes a different issues or another issues. If one party makes a significant concession on a high priority issue, it creates both goodwill and obligations for encouraging the other party to adjust their position on this issue. The the key takeaway in this case, positions are not static. They evolve through the negotiation process as parties exchange information and explore creative solutions. Now we arrive at step 4. Develop the negotiation strategy and a combining tactics. It is essential to understand the distinction between these two concepts. Strategy is the overall approach used to reach a mutual beneficial agreement. It is the high-level game plan. For example, your strategy might be collaborative problem solving or competitive value claiming, depending on the situation and the relationship. Tactics represents the art or skill of employing available means to accomplish an end, objective, or strategy. Tactics include the supporting action and plan activities. The specific move you make during negotiation. Examples include making the first offer, using silence strategically, ignoring negotiation with data, and so on. One critical preparatory tactic is to brief other stakeholders. Who is a stakeholder? A stakeholder is one who has an interest in or will be affected by negotiation outcome. This might include senior management who must approve the agreement, technical staff who will implement the contract, legal counsel who must review terms, financial personnel who must budget for it, end users who will be affected by the outcome. These stakeholders need to be aware of and an agreement with the desired objectives. This includes understanding major issues and initial positions for these issues. Why this is important? First, it prevents unwanted surprises. Imagine negotiating a complex agreement only to have your CFO rejected because you agreed to payment terms that violate the company's policy. Preventable disasters like this occurs when stakeholders aren't briefed. Second, it develops stakeholder buy-in and support. So when people are involved in the planning process, they become invested in the outcome and more likely to support implementation. They also provide valuable perspectives you might have overlooked. The final tactical preparation step is to practice the negotiation. And this applies specifically to complex and formal negotiations that involve large dollar amount where the financial stakes justify the investment in preparation. Also, long span of time where the agreement will govern the relationship for years. And where the negotiation is critical to the success of the organization, and the failure would have significant strategic consequences. For these high stakes situations, conducting a mock or simulated negotiation provides huge value. How does this work? You and your team rehearse the negotiation with team members playing different roles. This practice helps raises awareness of and anticipated questions and issues. You might discover gaps in your research, weaknesses in your arguments, or realize you haven't prepared responses to likely objections. Additionally, role playing, the other party develops empathy. When you argue from your partner's perspective, you gain insights into their concerns, their constraints, and motivation. This creates some sort of empathy, understanding, making you a more effective negotiator because you can anticipate their moves and craft proposals that address their interest while protecting your own. Professional negotiators frequently use these techniques before major negotiation. For example, sport agents practice before contract talks. Diplomats also rehearse before international summit. Legal teams conduct mock trials. The principle is the same. Practice reduces anxiety, it identifies weaknesses, and improves performance. In conclusion, effective negotiation doesn't happen by accident. It results from systematic planning and preparation. By following this structured approach, you significantly increase your probability of achieving favorable outcomes while maintaining positive relationship with your negotiation counterparts. Remember, negotiation is both an art and a science. As the science provides the systematic framework we have discussed today, the art come, comes from applying these principles with judgment, creativity, and interpersonal skills. As you develop your negotiation capabilities, you will find that through preparation not only improves your outcomes but also increases your confidence and reduces anxiety. As you move forward in your studies and careers, I encourage you to apply these planning principles to real negotiations you encounter, whether in case studies, simulations, or actual business situations. Each negotiation experience will deepen your understanding and sharpen your skills.